restless in their seats.
It's
Where
happening.
are we going?
And, you know, he talked about, you know, heart disease, cancer. One of those little computers monitoring your white blood cells, figuring out cancer's coming. Send another little computer in, kill that cancer before it spreads. If we can wipe out cancer, we can wipe out heart disease. What a wonderful future we have. But that is the future of technology. So he also looked, though, at the different types of jobs. Remember the chart I showed you? And you can see here that some two-year college graduates, you can see where their starting rate of pay is in these particular areas, and where their average rate of pay ends up being. And the average rate of pay is a pretty good salary for this day and age. Some of the careers in four-year colleges, the average rate of pay is actually lower than a two-year college if you major in those particular areas. So helping our students understand what the future is going to bring will help them understand what their economic situation will be. And as I talked about the high-skill jobs, if they focus on those areas where we predict that there's going to be a need for lots of employees, mostly in engineering, obviously, but different types of engineering, the salaries are those super high salaries that we saw expanding on that chart earlier. So what he's learned is, even though in his days of focusing on test scores as rigor, that by studying these other schools, the achievement of rigor actually begins with relationships and is anchored in relevant education. And so that's something we've been talking a lot about the direction we want to see going, is focusing on relevance in relationships. The social emotional is all about relationships. So I think we're moving in the right direction, and hearing brilliant professors are talking about these little computers that make us all woozy. It's pretty amazing that we're moving in the right direction. And of course, these are the 21st century skills that are going to be needed in the future. So it's something to think about. I think it's a guiding light for us as to where we need to go here. And you know, sometimes we have those conversations about rigor, relevance, and so you see we're actually getting really good information from really important people about which way we should go with major education. I think that's it. Thank you.
Thanks, Bob.
That's my superintendent's report.
Awesome. Members of the board, any questions about anything that we just saw Dr. Girardi share with us? Okay, well then in that case, moving on while Dr. Girardi comes on back to us. Citizens' comments. Hi, Ann.
I have something that I need to share.
Okay.
So, Charles came down to visit us, and you may be getting some emails thinking that Donald Trump was in the building. The kids at Greenmeadow thought he was Donald Trump.
But is he really that
He
old?
had a nice blue suit on, and he looked real sharp.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Very excited.
Yeah. Charles is always the best dressed man in the room.
Take my
Okay. Other citizens' questions or comments? Hello to our late arrivals. I know you were wrapped up in some other things, so thank you. All right, moving on. Let's talk about, again, 6th and 7th grade recess.
Thank you for the opportunity. I had an opportunity to talk with members of the 6 through 8 teams to talk about sustained silent community. And I'm just trying to pull up my community here. I apologize.
I have it on my phone. Maybe I can get my laptop here. Well, while Jen's setting up, just to give anybody in the room who's not really aware of the series of conversations that we've been having regarding recess at the Fowler. Last year was the first time in, I think, memory, period, that we had 6th and 7th grade recess at the Fowler School. At the time, we were considering it sort of a one-year pilot, and at this point, we shifted back and pulled back from recess, and we've implemented sustained silent reading. Based on some citizen questions and several parents who have showed up at previous meetings, we just wanted to dive a little bit deeper into the discussion of sustained silent reading. And our teacher team was kind enough to meet with Jen and come back with sort of a more thorough representation of their thoughts and their opinions and their research behind the decision-making process. So I'm looking forward to taking a closer look.
So essentially the first part that they talked about was the change in the programming. About 10 years ago, this is what the English language arts programming. See, we're starting with
Good to know.
Google's saying we need to speed up, Jen.
Google is in charge of a lot of things. Which is fine. So this is what the literacy program looked like about 10 years ago. The periods were longer, about 55 minutes. There were 2 literacy classes. One was focused on literature.
You said okay. Busy schedule.
So there were 2 classes, one focused on literature, literary analysis, and another one focused on reading skills and vocabulary. Daily independent reading of about 25 minutes called Patter, and then a school-wide independent reading program where students were tasked with reading 25 books over the course of the year and 2 books minimum over the course of the summer. Fast forward to now, as I said, we've reduced the time in the periods. There is 1 English class. That second reading class was dropped a few years ago, 6 years ago, in favor of world language, 5 or 6 years ago, in favor of world language on team. You can see there what the class is covering. And then the independent reading, there's nothing that is occurring during the school year. There is a summer reading program where students are keeping logs, but as you can see from the return of the 7th grade numbers, not super highly functioning for the majority of folks. To review what has been happening for this time before and after lunch is generally about 20 minutes before and after lunch, which isn't really long enough to do a class. It's not really long enough for a break, or it's too long for a break. And so it's been used, as you can see, over the years for a variety of periods. And as Justin mentioned, last year was the first year that we looked at adding recess to all of the grade levels at Fowler with varying degrees of success for students. So in answering the question, why sustained silent reading, the team really thought that we needed to go back to the data. We really, as an organization, as a profession, want to make data-informed decisions. And when we were looking at our STAR assessment data, we were looking at classroom observations of student attitudes about reading, when we're looking at the completion rates of summer reading programs and independent reading, we're really seeing a need to re-energize and re-emphasize this idea of literature as something that is part of your life and not something you do in English class. Additionally, and this is something that I think is important, we've been talking a lot about the benefit of movement, the benefit of active integration with other students. And one of the pieces that the team talked about, which we haven't discussed here, and it was great to hear them thinking about, because we have had a lot of conversations in the industry about it. About 50% of our students, or the U.S. population, are introverts. And there's been a lot of work over the last 5 or 6 years on what is all of the cooperative grouping in education, where we're really forcing students to work together and be active and engaged. The focus on verbal and active leadership, open class participation, that you have to sort of be up and engaged and excited. What is that doing to folks who really are more that introspective, that quiet thinker? Not that they're not engaged, not that they're not being studious or academic, they just do it in a way that looks really different from what our society seems to be And there's been a lot of work, and this is one of the more prevalent researchers on this. What are the things that we're doing in schools that are actually giving the students who are those more quiet thinkers some perception that there's something wrong with them and that they should be in this other mold, rather than saying, you just do something different and you bring something different to the table. We also have been talking a lot about meditation and mindfulness and growth mindset in the internet and in education. One of the things that the teams brought forward was, we really saw this as a time where we're forcing kids to go all the time, where they just stop, and it forces them to be quiet, which can be a good thing in terms of that piece of it. So there was some thinking into not just the idea that we need them to read, but that also that this quiet time is a good thing for kids to do. A question was asked around differentiation and support, and we did talk through this. Independent reading is naturally differentiated. Kids choose books of their interest, and they choose books that are comfortable for them. For kids who need some support in that area, the teachers are guiding them and helping them to challenge themselves appropriately, but also do something that's within their skill set so that they feel comfortable doing that. This time is used for some students who are not completing, like you mentioned, that one literature class, who are not able to complete those independent readings at home if there are novels assigned in the English class and they're not completing that at home for whatever reason that's occurring. It allows time for the teachers in a natural way and non-punitive way to give them access to that as an area for reinforcement. We do provide audiobooks and differentiated resources. One of the team leaders mentioned this idea of team reading, where two kids can read together out loud to each other to support students in that way. And then the other component of this is that it provides a time for kiddos who really need some intervention in some different areas, whether it's behavioral, whether it's other academic areas. This is time where that can occur, where they're not being removed from something else. One of the things that I'm pretty rigid about is that you don't want to pull kids from the elective classes to do interventions, because we need that brain break in some ways and thinking in different ways. But this is something where they're getting out art class, they're getting out PE class, but then they're also able to get their interventions if that needs to happen. So follow-ups and next steps. The team had already talked about some data collection pieces that they'll be looking at in terms of perception data of students in regards to the reading itself, perception data in regards to the recess component and the movement component. Because what was interesting is they said, we didn't collect formal data on this last year, but informally, the kids were excited for recess, and if you asked them about recess, they said that they were excited about it. But then when we saw them out on the field, they were sort of sitting by themselves and reading. A bunch of them were sitting by themselves and reading. So, and again, that's not formal data. We want to formalize that a little bit to get some perception data, and they had already talked about doing that. So we'll be surveying the students. We'll also be surveying them about their feelings about their literacy skills. How are they feeling as a reader? Is this helping them to feel more comfortable as a reader? Is it helping them to see literature as part of their life? And again, not just something that happens in English class. And they also recommended a referral to the Fowler Scheduling Committee to bring all of the thoughtful comments back to the Fowler Scheduling Committee, because as we talked about at length, the benefits of recess, the benefits of movement, getting up and moving. There are benefits, there is research behind that. There is research behind the mindfulness and the thoughtfulness and the quietness. There is research that time on learning matters, and you have to have so much time on learning for all these different subject areas. So how do we do all of those things in a way that makes sense for our brains and for our students? So that will be referred back to the scheduling committee to look at that and get it started. So that's where we're at.
Thank you.
And we do have some folks here who participated in this, who have nicely agreed to answer questions as well.
Cool. Well, before I kick it to the other members of the committee, I've been saying thank you a lot tonight, which I really appreciate and enjoy. I think I can speak for myself and perhaps echo the sentiment of some of the other members of the board when I say it's nice to have more of the background information. There were some members of the community that came to our meetings that approached some of us individually, sent emails, etc., that were just concerned about what appeared to be a rather abrupt change to sort of what they had come to know and expect last year. I really appreciate the polling of the professionals. You know, my philosophy is you hire good people and then you trust them to make the right decisions. And more importantly, that this decision seems to be really well backed up with empirical research. I do like the idea of involving the Fowler Schedule Committee. I think that there is also a need for movement, as you were touching on, and I'm hoping that over the course of a year and the involvement of more people, and perhaps looking at this a little more thoroughly, we might be able to find some sort of a happy medium, so that our kids that still might need some of that movement also have access to the movement, you know, a little bit more frequently. But thank you for the time and the effort and the consideration that was put into all of this for the members of the audience that were involved in this process as well. Other members, comments or questions? Go ahead, Mary B.
So one of the teachers that maybe participated, question for you, what does the teacher do in the classroom while the students are reading? Is it planning time? Is it, you know, helping students that need the help? How do the kids pick out what books they're going to read, that kind of thing? If you could just more boots on the ground kind of explain what happens, that would be great.
Sure. I can speak. I'm Meg Sullivan, seventh grade ELA teacher. And we, at the beginning of the year, we modeled the reading as well. So we all came in with books and we were reading. And I had a student today who said to me, "Did you finish that book you were reading?" Like with amazement that a book can be read over the course of like the 20 minutes. Because there's some kids who have done that. But for this one student who hadn't thought about how the time reading could really add up, could equal reading an entire book. She was like amazed by it. So we've done a lot of modeling for it, where we've been reading the story, or reading a story, our own books that we brought in this one. There's also been a couple of kids who hadn't found a book to read, and so I've gone and talked to some of those kids and some of the other teachers who've gone and said, "What are you interested in?" And had some conversations about why they can't find those books to read. We're working on a scheduling with the library. Right now, it doesn't quite coincide that our silent reading time is when the library is open. So it's been a little bit of a planning challenge for us to find time where the kids can go to the library and have some books. But Ms. Hayward, the librarian at the Fowler, has been able to help us in pull some books that she's been able to sort of display for kids and be able to do things like that. So we're basically supporting the reading by first modeling it, and then as some of the teachers assign novels for the whole class to read, there might be kids who don't get the reading done, and we're going to give them a copy of the book and say, "Hey, why don't you get started on tonight's reading so you're prepared for class tomorrow?" Or, "I know you didn't get a chance to finish the reading, but I want you to catch up, give them a moment to catch up." Whereas last year, there were kids who were just chronically behind in reading the stories, and then when they came to class and they had discussions, they weren't ready for them, and it was hard to get them caught up without saying, "You need to come in before school," or "I need you to stay after school." So those things haven't quite happened yet, because a lot of us haven't quite gotten to our classroom knowledge yet, but that was one of the things that we were hoping to be able to do as well.
Okay, excellent, thank you.
I just want to jump in. I love Susan Cain's stuff. We had to read her book a couple years ago as a faculty, and I identify as an introvert, so I'm a little biased. But I do think that what Jen was saying about there being, you know, so many demands of kids to work collaboratively and work together. I just feel like that, like I so appreciate that as a justification. And I teach high school English for those who don't know, and I feel like we talk a lot in my department at the high school level about the way that kids' reading has shifted. And so because a lot of reading happens on a screen or electronically, that we're reading quickly and we're skimming. And so we notice a difference, at least with kids when they're getting to the high school, that they're just not reading as much. And so I was, you know, hearing the concerns of parents who are worried about time to move, and I still think it's great to keep thinking about that. But I really appreciate the getting back to concerns that were raised in the community, getting back to us, and I'm just excited for the program. So thank you.
Mark Meyer, second grade science, and the class that I have right my most difficult class to supervise. And first, the sustained silent reading was a hard sell. It was about 70% of the kids were like, yay, we get to read, and I go to my library, get my book. And the others, so I started off also a lot of reading, and I found that was not a viable option for me. So I was having to go around and have conversations with certain kids who maybe were not quite as interested in it. And as the year has gone on, each week, more kids bring books. They're able to find things on the shelf in my room, mostly science related. And then last week, I brought in a number of books of my own personal collection for them to read, and that has generated some interest too. And every day, behavior gets a little better until today, that after lunch class was my best behavior class of the day. They came in, they started reading. They were so silent that a minute and a half before the class ended, I said, okay, everybody get up, take a stretch break before we learn. So it is having an impact. These kids go to their next class ready to learn. And I was always one of these people who's like, no, kids need recess. And kids do need movement. But I can tell you the difference in the readiness to learn after recess from last year compared to after this year. It has really sort of opened my eyes, and I've talked to other teachers who think they're more statistics for themselves, who were in the same camp as I was. It's like, oh yeah, it's recess. And it's like, wait a minute, this really is something different we're seeing.
Thank you.
Sure, go right ahead.
We hate it too.
I'm Lisa Pettine, I teach Spanish here, and my first week of sustained silent reading, I knew that the kids were reading my book. It's the first week of school, so I bought it, and I don't know if you guys know Paul Harvey, you're probably too young. He used to have a radio show called The Rest of the Story. It was like my favorite thing about the kids. I listened to my grandmother's house, and she said, "Do you know the rest of the story?" No, I have no idea. So I started doing a read aloud for the kids. And I started with one story that was all about the Titanic, and I'm like, do you know the rest of the story? And they're like, the Titanic! So they kept asking me, read another one, read another one, read another one. And then after a week, they all had their own books. And I said, okay, you can read your own books. They're like, can we get that book from the library? And a couple of kids went down to Miss Hayward and said, we want the Paul Harvey book. It's been out of print since like 1960. We want the Paul Harvey book. We want to find out the rest of the story. And they were like, can we borrow your book? And unfortunately, I lent it to a teacher already because he wanted to read it. But I was just so excited that I was like, they're never going to want to hear the story. But they sat and they listened and they loved being read to. And then they started to, it seemed to me that they were understanding this idea of reading is fun. It's an adventure. I can find out what happened at the end of the story. And it didn't seem like work to them. So that was just my positive takeaway, is that, I was anxious going in, how this is going to work. And I think it worked beautifully.
Excellent.
Fantastic.
Thank you.
I'm a big believer in the power of choice, and I think that choice in a world where our young people are often mandated to most of their waking minutes, the idea of freedom of choice and engaging in literature, it doesn't always have to be a novel. Graphic novels, comic books. I mean, I haven't read one for years, but even like, Sports Illustrated magazine or something. Anything to, like you said, reading is actually fun. It shouldn't just be something that you have to do because your teacher or your parent tells you that you should be doing it. So anything that we can do to expose them is a big win in my book. So awesome. Thank you for sharing that. Bethlehem, we haven't heard from you yet. Anything?
Well, first, I just really appreciate the time that people took to be able to help us further the discussion and like talk about this more, because it's certainly meant to help us all work together and not meant to try to question what decisions were made. So I just wanted to mention that because I think that I seem to have an introverted child and an extroverted child, and I'm well aware of the spectrum of needs, and my husband he's the yin to my yang. So, I just really appreciate, and I believe even already that there was really mindfulness in how this decision was made. And one thing that occurred to me in hearing Jen explain where this is coming from and where it's going, and hearing the teachers talk, is I feel like when I look at my kids who are at the elementary level at this point, I'm like, how do I help them? How do we parents also help? I don't feel like I have a moment when we're waking to be able to sit and model reading, first of all. And second, how do we help give that love of reading and learning? And would love any tips and ideas that educators might have in what you're doing in the classrooms. And I do think that we will continue the conversation and look forward to hearing what we can do for the full spectrum and those kids that might need to move as well. So I appreciate that. So that's it.
Awesome. Yeah, hi.
Carl,
Hi, Mara.
just to give you an idea, I found that over this summer, my middle son previously had really not liked to read at all. And I love to read, and he does see me reading quite often. But I found this summer that I started reading the books that he was reading. And he really, I think he really liked that. He really felt like, okay, we're both reading the same book, and now we can talk about it. And I think that really helped a lot. He read 9 books this summer.
Wow.
So that was a lot of fun.
Cool. Thanks, Mara. Yeah, go ahead.
I just have a question about the way that Jen put on that the summer reading has pretty much gone away in the past. Is that coming back as part of this whole literacy
Good
program?
question.
We're going to refer that to the, I don't have an answer to that. I think it's something that the teams would like to see increased. Again, it's just this notion of reading as something that we do as being people. How that looks and what that structure is, I think that was not a part necessarily of our conversation. But I do think that this idea of we're going to read all of the time as a school, this is something that we do, is laying the groundwork for something more successful to happen over the summer. So I don't have an answer for you right now, but we can get one for sure.
I definitely think it's something that's important, and I think it's something that's completely gone away in the summer. And if we're talking about how important it is during the school year, that we're, really concentrating on it, then it feels like there should be some effort, some sort during the summer, as opposed to just linking to like the Boston Public School summer reading program or something like that. We need to make that.
I saw hands over. Hi.
Hi,
I don't know you. What's your name?
my name is Becca Solomon.
Hi.
And my daughter is a 6th grader. And I know I'm coming in late in some ways to this conversation, and I don't like to speak here when I'm either. But, and I'm not even sure where to start. I have so much to say about this. But I do appreciate how mindfully everyone has been trying to figure this out and recognizing the many different aspects of what children need and how to put this together. I am coming from the kids really need recess camp though,
Okay.
for a lot of reasons. I know that you're saying you're familiar with the research, you know how physical activity stimulates brain growth and activity and the importance of moving, the importance of having a break from the rigors of academia. And the things that I'm hearing you saying feel like everyone is really trying to get our kids in the right place and do the right things. One thing is really popping up for me though, and that is the notion of choice. I'm also a big proponent of
Absolutely.
autonomy and choice.
Yep.
And when you're talking about, when we're talking about what kids need, they need to have a choice, and recess is the only time that they have that choice. Sustained silent reading is great because you choose your book, but not if that's not your choice. Now, I happen to have a voracious reader, and frankly, she read, I think, 50 books over the summer. Nobody asked for her log, so that's why it wasn't submitted. She brought it to school the first week, and she reads all the time. But now she feels like she's being forced to read. Now, if kids want to read on the playground during recess, that is a good use of recess. Movement is important, but what's even more important is that these kids have a choice, that they are in school. How many just about, and they have no sense of, this is my free time. My daughter is telling me, not only that she now is, and she reads all the time, that she's feeling forced to read, and she needs to get up and move, and she realized that what is happening for, and she's not a behavioral issue kid. She's never going to be a kid who's a behavioral issue. She's a good girl and does everything she's supposed to do, but there isn't any time. She feels like she's disconnected from her friends because they barely have time to talk. They have 3 minutes to get from their locker to class. Lunch is abbreviated and loud, and recess is the only time. And I do respect that I'm advocating. I do feel like this is important for all the kids. I understand there are kids who need extra help and they need extra reading time. But over everybody, they need to just have a choice and have free time and have that time where their brain doesn't even have to say, even if it's art, even if it's music, that they don't have to do anything that they're being told to do. And I've heard the argument that there is, in the past, that there, I think, Bob, in your email to me, you mentioned that there have been conflicts on the playground, and that was one of the issues for teachers and for parents. And my argument to that would be, then these kids need more recess. They need recess to be better, but they need more recess because we're talking about social emotional development and physical development. And when these three things aren't aligned, cognitive development, social emotional development, and physical or motor skills, when they're not aligned, that's when children are in distress. That's when they are anxious and they're acting out and you have behavior problems. They need all of those things. And if they're not able to interact socially, they need more opportunities to practice that. It may be that we as a district need some help with that. And I've been researching, I'm sure you guys have too. I know I'm not coming in saying I'm an expert, but I've been looking, and there are different programs, there are even grants where they come and they help you to make recess productive. So, I'm coming from that end. I'm just saying if we're talking about kids who can't sit still, then let them not sit still. And if we're talking about, kids who choose to read on the playground, great, let them read on the playground. But there's got to be room for both choices. And sit down and read and don't have any time to move or any free choice doesn't offer that. So.
Can I, a lot of what you said makes a lot of sense. And some of the things we are thinking about, and if there's any grants, let me know about them because I love grants. And so let's talk some more. And to one of your points, one of the things we're doing with the social emotional training is that we're actually training some of the paraprofessionals that will be on recess so that they can work to deal with conflicts and help students learn on the playground. So believe it or not, we are going in that direction of trying to get some of the people who are doing recess monitoring, that kind of training. So just to let you know, we are thinking on the same wavelength in a lot of ways.
I know. I can hear that.
Yeah.
It's like I think people want to get to the same place and
Yeah.
maybe feel like there are different routes that are better to get to it. So, yeah.
But let's stay in touch.
And I think it's fair to say that our committee that's going to be looking at the Fowler schedule for next year has a lot of really interesting questions and perspectives to ponder. I know that we've had some discussions amongst ourselves that there's got to be somewhere in the middle, because the pendulum can't swing both ways and just stay in one direction. So I think tonight's an important part of that process, and I really appreciate your perspective and your counter argument also, so thank you. Even if you don't like public speaking, that was even if you don't like public speaking, that was fantastic.
Very well done.
Anything else? Yeah, hi.
Hi, it's me again.
Yep.
Before I came to this meeting tonight, my son who's in sixth grade said, don't just sit in the meeting and be quiet, you have to speak up. He wanted to come to the meeting tonight, and I discouraged him from doing that. I'm not sure what he would have said exactly. It sounds like we're looking at changes for next year, and that honestly makes me want to cry. That he's going to lose out this entire year of having 15 minutes a day where he can move his body. When teachers are talking about kids like running through the hall
So the scheduling committee, I'm sorry. So the scheduling committee, yes, will obviously look at scheduling for next year as well, but one of the things that the scheduling committees do is to look anytime there are changes, and there were obviously changes with the 8th grade coming down in different pieces, to look at what are things that we need to do. So there's a potential that something, I didn't mean to suggest that everything was for next year. The scheduling committee is formed now, I believe. I don't know if any of you were on it. The scheduling committee, I believe, is formed now. Certainly I had seen requests go out for membership, and so they continually look to see what are changes that potentially could be made. And so there's a potential that something could happen. I think what we wanted to do in talking with the teachers and in talking to Dr. Girardi and the school committee, again, I appreciate the perspectives. I appreciate the perspective of the students. We want to include their voices in this, and that's why the surveying of the students and asking the questions is something that we are going to continue to do and respond to that data so that we're making decisions based on what we're seeing collectively. Individual stories are great and certainly provide perspective, but we want to make sure that we're making decisions based on what we're seeing collectively. So we will continue that process. It is not something that we're going to ask the kids in June, hey, how is this reading thing? So we'll be doing that over time. I don't want to make any promises because, again, I think you heard from us last week, and I want to reiterate this week. I understand that there's disagreement about the decision, but this was a decision that our professionals did make and did so thoughtfully, and I appreciate the disagreement about the decision itself, but I do want to value the work that they do and the perspectives that they bring to the table. The other piece that I do want to put in, and I know I've had this conversation with several teachers about sort of what do they do when they see that the kids can't hold it together, and that they respond to that very frequently by bringing the kids outside or doing an earned reward, or by doing like, hey guys, we had this really tough moment that we had, let's go outside for 10 minutes and then come back in, and the teaming model allows for that to happen in some ways. So your teachers are responding to, I don't want you to think that the teachers are saying, nope, you walk in my room and can't walk out until the bell rings. They are responding to that. It may not be as frequently or as consistently as what you're advocating for, but they are aware of students' needs and responding in that capacity. So again, it will be referred back to the scheduling committee, both in short-term and in long-term changes.
I just wish that it wasn't a choice of silent reading and recess aren't anywhere close to being in the same category. They're completely different things. And I don't understand the either or mentality. Really, I understand it's really hard. Zone time is how long? 45 minutes?
30? 46, zone is 46.
So can't 20 minutes of that be dedicated to silent reading time? The teachers are reading aloud to the kids, totally value that, that's fabulous. They're discussing books, that's fabulous. Can't 20 minutes of that time be silent reading time? And the kids then have, it just seems like, I honestly, each person that I ask this question to, I feel like I can get a different answer. And when my son went to the principal and asked her, she also gave a different answer. So it feels like
A different answer as to whether it can happen or whether it,
making the decisions and what the reasoning is behind. Yeah, the stories have not been consistent. And that's not their fault necessarily. I'm talking to you just
these are consistent. These are the consistent stories that I've been told. So I apologize that that's happened. These are
a different story.
these are consistent stories.
I was here so she could talk about it.
Sure.
It seems like a really important topic for her.
She wanted to be. She had a family emergency and she's in Vermont. So unfortunately, she could not come tonight. But she had planned on being here for this piece as well. So again, there are lots of different pieces in terms of the zone time they're reading to the students. That is one component of what's happening. The reason they're doing that is because it will filter into some of the writing pieces and working on writing and improving writing skills that we've heard and seen in data and heard from the community that is of concern. As I mentioned in the presentation, there's lots of things that have to happen within a school day or should be happening within a school day, and what our job is to find the right balance of those. And again, I appreciate you disagree with the balance that is currently in existence. I hear that loud and clear. And we will continue to work and to look at that and to figure out how we can make sure that all of our students' needs are being met. You know, I don't, and I guess that's where I'd like to leave it in terms of that. I do think that our teachers are thoughtful, include student voices. We are going to look to do that more formally through this process. As I mentioned, we're developing some surveys and metrics so that we can figure out what works in that capacity, so that it's not, you know, raise your hands if you want recess and there's the group think, but it's actually getting at, okay, let's look at you as an individual student. What do you need? What are you honestly telling us that you need, so that we can make sure we do that and then put it into appropriate schedules in that capacity. So we will continue the conversation for sure.
Thank you, Jen.
Can I add a quick thing? Because I love Susan Cain so much.
Yeah.
I just want to say, if people don't know her or know her work, she has a great TED Talk, if you like TED Talks, if you look up Susan Cain.
Okay.
Anyway, set aside.
At this point,
If we have, so I'm sitting here and I have all these questions in class. If we have additional thoughts, I don't want to take up all the time. Who do we ask or talk to?
You can send them to me and I'll
Yeah.
filter them to the other
And-
one. Sure.
Yeah, I'm very confused now based on some of the things that were said about, you know, is it an issue with people not being on board with the kids need recess, or is it an issue of people think that the sustained silent reading is so important, it trumps everything else, and there's no way to fit it in? Like, I'm not really sure where it's falling apart, because to me personally, they're both really important. So that's why I'm like saying, not understanding why they can't both happen.
I think it's an issue of, it's not sustained silent reading in recess. It's an issue of sustained silent reading, recess, math, science, social studies, intervention, extension, inquiry, social emotional learning. Do you know what I'm saying? So I think it's an issue of all of those components. And, you know, scheduling is trying to put a puzzle together to figure out which pieces should go in the right space so we have enough pieces to fill up the whole day, but then also how big is each piece so that we make sure we're getting the things that we need to do. And if you look at each sort of area in isolation, in the literature and the research around each area in isolation, it makes sense that you of course would do whatever it is. I think, Mary, you had mentioned in Finland they have recess I keep saying every 15 minutes, but that can't be. I keep saying every 15 minutes, but I know that can't be right. Every 45 minutes they have a recess break or a movement break. And in isolation, looking at the social, emotional, and the movement learning and the brain learning, that makes a whole lot of sense. There's also a lot of research that isn't included in that conversation around other things that need to happen. So it's a matter all the puzzle pieces together, and I think the disagreement here is how big should each puzzle piece be, is really where the disagreement comes, where you folks are expressing that one piece, we should be able to put this one piece in, and it should be this size, and other people are saying, well, when we look at all of the other pieces, and this extra piece that we need to put in, we feel like that's a piece we can take out, and I think that's the disagreement, and it's a perfectly reasonable disagreement to have. But that, as I say, we'll bring that back and we'll look at all of those pieces and figure out what we can do and how we can, again, make sure that all students are learning and growing and becoming functional and productive human beings, which is what we try and do.
so at this point, looking at the clock and realizing we're about 30 minutes long, no, and I appreciate the spirited discussion, and more importantly, like, the very polite disagreements, you know, like, I don't sit here and pretend to believe that I know all of the answers, or any of us sitting up here, but I would encourage you, if you still have an opinion that you feel like you want to flesh out or dig down a little bit deeper, pick up the phone, make an email, or send an email, copy me on it, please, so that I'm part of the conversation also. And let's continue it, because, I mean, really, we're in a situation where there is no perfect answer, you know, and ultimately we're talking about individual people, and what's right for a group is not going to be right for another group, and pieces of the pie, and scheduling, and minutes in a day, and teachers in a building, and time on learning, and there's just so many moving parts that the more that we can talk about it, maybe the more we can reach a decision that satisfies people more fully. My brain is starting to shut down.
You have a whole nother 90 minutes that you gotta be productive
No.
So don't go there.
in. I have worksheets.
At this point, I'm going to kick it to the next agenda item and go to members' comments or questions.
I just had one comment.
go ahead, Mary.
It was just a follow-up to the Spanish exchange students that were here, and I just wanted to give kudos again to Jen Adams and all the host families and to the staff and that, everybody that made it such a successful event for everyone, and looking forward to the February piece. And they actually, Jen Adams had a student that did a video. I don't know, is it up on the website
I have
yet?
not been able to
Yeah,
do
so
that.
if anybody has an opportunity, it was pretty cool of all the different, it's amazing how much they did in the course of the 10
Yeah.
days or whatever that they were here. And also, one other kudo to John Ogden up at the high school, because I was at the Selectmen's meeting on Tuesday night, and he, in conjunction with the WAVM students, did an amazing video of the fire department, Maynard Fire Department, and everything that they do, and that. So it was really well done, so that's it.
Fantastic.
Oh, actually, that kind of kicked in. I know we're waiting for police and fire to come in and do some presentations on the
I wasn't
collaborative
gonna-
thing. So,
Yeah.
just that reminded me of that Sergeant Noble is working on a PowerPoint for us as we speak.
Perfect,
So
thank
it'll
you.
be in one of the next meetings, I think, next month, but they are working on it, just to
Thank
let you know.
All right. At this point, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn.
Do I hear a second? Made and seconded. All in favor? All right. At this point, we're going to kick it off and go to the book discussion. It's the purpose of the tables spread out throughout the room. Jen, do you want to give some instructions?
Yeah, so basically what we're going to do is we're going to take a protocol called the 4 A's, and essentially we're going to divide ourselves up, hopefully evenly between the tables. I'd ask that you sit with maybe people you don't talk to on a regular basis, but depending on the group size, maybe we'll all just sit together, we'll see. So there are 4 questions that I'd like for you to consider, and we'll take about 15 minutes to do that. The first one is about assumptions. What assumption does the author of the text hold? I have this for you, you don't have to write it down. The second one is about agreement. In what areas do you agree with the text? The third one is about arguments. In what areas do you want to argue with the text? The fourth one is about aspiring, and what parts of the text do you want to aspire to? So we'll take about 15 minutes for you to get some thoughts down, passages, pieces of the book that stood out to you in these particular ways. We have food in the back, coffee, we'll put some music on, and in about 15 minutes we will
No food.
begin the conversation. Thank you all so much.